Bueno, Meg y Ryan, muchísimas gracias por hacer esta película. Un aplauso, por favor. Nieves. Bueno, ¿qué tal? ¿Cómo estáis? Regular, ¿no? Estáis... Es que estábamos hablando fuera sobre que ellos están como felices, como sonriendo, ¿no? Y de repente salíamos de la película en plan, wow, ojalá no hubiera pasado lo que ha pasado, ¿no? Yo miraba todo el rato la pantalla y pensaba, quiero cambiar el final. Y no podía cambiar el final. Pero yo quiero que hablemos sobre la película, que es una oda al amor, ¿no? No sé cómo os planteasteis esto desde el principio, cuando te llega a ti el proyecto, Ryan, y decides cómo enfocar este tema tan difícil.
Yes, well, thank you all so much for being here. It's beautiful to be in Spain, getting to share this film. I had never heard of Andrea Gibson. So Andrea is a well-known poet in the United States, but I'm not a big poetry fan, so I had never heard of Andrea. But I was friends with a famous stand-up comedian in the U.S. named Tig Notaro. I don't know how famous she is here, but she's very well-known in the U.S. and very, very funny. And I've been saying to Tig for like a decade, bring us a comedy. Why aren't documentaries funnier? We want to make a comedy documentary. And so we were very confused when Tig called a couple years ago pitching a film about cancer and poetry. But Tig said, trust me, Andrea is one of the funniest people I've ever known in my entire life. And they are approaching end of life and their potential death with this remarkable perspective that I've never seen. And so we did a little bit of research into Andrea's poetry and art form, which blew me away, which you've now seen in the film. And then we listened to a few interviews with Andrea talking about mortality that really scared me. I'm not someone who's naturally comfortable with the idea of death. But we said to Tig, if Andrea wants to meet us, we'll fly there next week. And so that's what we did. And we pulled into their driveway. I knew nothing about Megan. Like, the fact that this is a love story is a total surprise to me. But they came out and they gave us a hug. And the first thing that Andrea said was, welcome to my home. I guess you're going to be with me when I die. And that's how the film began.
Wow. Y bueno, yo tengo muchas preguntas a nivel técnico, pero quería preguntarte primero, Meg, ¿cómo estás?
Oh yeah, you know, I'm grateful that you mentioned at the top of this that Ryan and I were smiling and laughing in the hallway. Andrea, for those of you who don't know, Andrea did die 7 months ago. And I think I did not expect that I would be able to find the joy that we've been able to collectively find in the grief. But the day that Andrea died, I called Ryan, I talked to Ryan and Jessica, our film's producer, and I told them to go out and see something beautiful and do something beautiful with their day, because for us to do anything else would be to have missed the point of what Andrea had been trying to teach us throughout the 4 years since their diagnosis, and then the mere year it took to make the documentary. And I think Andrea would also say that, and the film is kind of representative of this idea, but when you allow yourself to feel grief, when you allow the sadness in, when you look death in the face, when you look mortality in the face, that is actually what allows you to experience joy, what allows you to experience love and dancing and connection. You can't shut yourself off to the hard emotion. You have to feel it so that you can feel everything else. And I think that's what I'm doing now.
Parece como que sois más sabios, ¿no? O sea, creo que cuando algo te atraviesa de esa manera, ves el mundo desde otra perspectiva, ¿no? No sé si ahora esto se ha hecho... Sí, ¿no? Lo estás viendo así porque cuando... Hay una cosa muy interesante en la película que dice Andrea, ¿no? Lo queer, al final, yo como persona también dentro del colectivo, te atraviesa por dentro, ¿no? Y me parece que es un mensaje fantástico porque creo que ha hecho activismo hasta el final. Incluso lo está haciendo sin estar aquí, ¿no? O sea, que de alguna manera está, pero que a mí me atravesó esa parte de hacerlo queer incluso no estando, ¿no? ¿Ella lo tenía claro esto?
Clear about...
O sea, claro que quería hacer... Que este activismo iba a llegar tan lejos.
Yeah, I think so. Andrea did get to see the film, which was really fantastic, because we didn't end the film with Andrea's death, and Andrea got to see the premiere of it with 500 people in the audience at Sundance, and Andrea, I think, first of all, saw a lot of laughter, which we weren't expecting. But they turned to me after we saw it and said, this is going to help so many people. And they didn't just mean it would help people with cancer. They meant it would help anyone going through a challenging time see that you don't necessarily have to meet a challenging moment with anger or resentment or bitterness or closing your heart off to the world. You can meet it in this open-hearted, accepting, present way. And yes, a friend of mine, Glennon Doyle, one of the executive producers on our film, calls Andrea the poet laureate of heaven now, because it does feel like Andrea is still really doing that work in the world. Yeah.
Qué bonito. Ryan, te quería preguntar, ¿un año de rodaje?
Yeah, 1 year. So when we flew to Colorado, when I said Andrea and Megan came out and hugged us, that was a January, and then we premiered at January at the Sundance Film Festival in 2025. So it is my 15th documentary. It is the fastest one I've ever made. There were many reasons it was the fastest. I mean, one of them is obvious. It was the ticking clock of Andrea's health. Very, very early on, I think the second shoot is that scene in the bedroom when they're in bed getting a cancer marker result. And they are both internalizing that as a very bad result and that Andrea may die very soon. And that was just our second shoot. So we were moving very, very quickly. But we were also so intoxicated with being there that we were there all the time. Like we shot every 3 weeks. So those 3-week cycles that Megan talks about in the film of chemo and the cancer marker results, we would go for that period. And so we were accumulating a lot of footage fast, and it's also the blessing and the curse of making a film about two poets is that everything that you shoot is beautiful and profound and eloquent and hilarious. And so, 10 months into production, we were thinking like, oh, how much longer are we going to make this documentary? We have so much good stuff. And my editor, her name's Bernice Chavez, she started to ask the question, like, does this need to be an end-of-life film? Is this what this film is about, this person dying? And we all began to shift our perspective that, what Andrea and Megan, but Andrea was showing us through the course of this film was not how to die gracefully. I mean, I think that is part of it for sure. But it's more so than that, how to live, how all of us can live before we die. And so we decided that doesn't need to be the ending of our film. And so it allowed us to end it sooner than we expected. So the best phone call of my entire career was getting to call Megan and Andrea and say, our film is finished, and in 7 weeks it's premiering at Sundance, because Andrea just never imagined that the film would be finished while they were still alive.
Claro, es que el tiempo iba totalmente en contra. O sea, es fascinante el trabajo que habéis hecho. Claro, yo os quería preguntar cómo era la metodología de rodaje, ¿no? Porque creo que hay un momento, este fenómeno, ¿no? Como con mosca en la pared, en las que se te olvida de que está ahí el equipo, ¿no? Y también cómo llevabais como equipo ver ese proceso emocionalmente hablando, ¿no? O sea, porque yo coger y plantar la cámara y ver este dolor, no sé si podría, ¿eh?
Yeah, I mean, it's rare these days in documentary because people are so accustomed to cameras, so accustomed to social media, so accustomed to filming themselves. It's really difficult to find a documentary subject these days where you can make a truly what we call verite documentary. So following something unfolding, observational filmmaking. It's tricky to find those subjects. And very, very early on, I'm talking like the very first shoot, we realized, I call them unicorn documentary subjects, both of them, Andrea and Megan as a couple, but also separately. They were both so natural on camera in a way that I've never seen in my 14 previous documentaries. A really good example of that is there's the scene in our film at the dinner table where the fingering, thumbing conversation comes up. It's probably the funniest scene in the film. That was the day that I met Andrea and Megan. That's night one of filming, and that never happens in my line of work, where you get your best scene on day one. And so I think you should speak to this on why they were so comfortable from the very beginning. But it really was, as an observational filmmaker, they really were golden subjects when it came to being natural. And it's not like they acted like the cameras weren't there, because we were so close with them. And you see we break the fourth wall throughout the film. Andrea is interacting with us. Megan is interacting with us. It's just that they were so comfortable with the process from the very beginning. But I think you should speak to the why.
Yeah, I think that when you watch the film, it feels like the film was made by our best friends, but we had really just met them. Like, when I see it, I'm like, oh, that seems like a movie that was made by a close group of friends. But the truth is, we had not even talked on the phone before we met them in the driveway, and Andrea said, I guess you'll be with me when I die. And Ryan had told us that they would probably film 1,000 hours of footage and that they'd only use 1% of it, so just, relax. And we took that really literally and had the dinner table conversation. But I think that there's also something to the fact that because likely Andrea's life would be far shorter than any of us ever wanted it to be, it would have been such a waste of time to not show up on day one with our hearts open to these new people that we were inviting into our lives. Can you imagine the idiocy of inviting these people in and then being like, well, we're gonna take a couple weeks to suss it out. And also truly, it was such a good mix. We fell in love with them right away. By the third day of filming, they were flying back to Los Angeles, and Andrea and I were hugging them and crying in the parking lot and telling them we loved them. And it was true. And they were saying it back, which I later learned is like breaking all the rules of documentary filmmaking. But
Old school documentary filmmaking, for sure, yeah.
Bueno, es que todos parecéis nuestras amigas. O sea, yo cuando se acaba la película he pensado, ¿dónde está mi amiga, no? Llega un momento en que atraviesas la cuarta pared, pero hasta la quinta.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, that is my true hope with this film, because you never know as a documentary filmmaker if what you are feeling or what you think you are observing is going to translate to other people. You get little signs, like your editor, for instance, is an outsider. They're not there on the shoot. And when you bring the footage to the editor and they're reacting strongly to it, you get a first sign. But you often really don't know until you show the film to crowds. And because we finished this film so quickly, we never tested the film with audiences or anything. But I had this sense, and my producing partner is my best friend since we're little kids. Her name's Jess. And so we've been best friends since we were 9 years old. So we're very, very close. And we kept saying to each other, like, this feels like the most special thing we have ever made in our lives. But we weren't sure of that until we started sharing the film with audiences. But to your point, my goal was we feel so close with these people. I feel like, for me, it was life-changing to get to make this film. It's changed the way I think about my life and especially the rest of my life. If we can somehow bottle up our experience, the personal experience we are having, and put that into a film that audiences that don't know them personally can also feel, then we will have done our job. So when you say you feel like you're friends with them as well, and a lot of people say that, to me that's the highest compliment for the film.
A mí hay una cosa que también me encanta, que no solo es una película que habla sobre el amor, sino que sobre el colectivo LGTB, que en realidad parece que es normal vernos allí, ¿no? Cómo os amáis y cómo os queréis, pero en la mitad del planeta pues todavía nos matan por ser homosexuales. Entonces yo quería, bueno, daros las gracias por enfocar también la película desde un punto colectivo en el sentido LGTB, y quería preguntaros a ti como director y a ti como protagonista si era una cosa que era para ti de vital importancia, o si simplemente como estaba dentro de nuestra vida, ¿no? Lo hemos normalizado y lo querías meter ahí como algo dentro de la historia.
Well, I am gay myself, and not all of my documentaries have been about the LGBTQ community, but a good portion of them have, and I've made many films, including one that was quite big in the US, 12 years ago, about gay marriage before gay marriage was legal in the US. And I watched how the documentary was about two couples, so just like two families fighting the legal fight for gay marriage in the US up to our Supreme Court. So it took like a very political issue, but it put it on a very, very human level. And I remember watching how that film, when we would show it to audiences, and people on the wrong side of gay marriage in the US would watch the film, and then they would fall in love with these two families, and then the film would end, and they would think differently about the political issue or the legal issue. So to me, that is the greatest power of documentary filmmaking across the board, queer or non-queer storylines. It has the ability to bring an audience into a room for 90 minutes, and in a way journalism can't, really make an audience get to know people. And so we didn't choose this film because it was a queer love story or a non-binary person, but the opportunity that allows me as a queer director to know that audiences are going to watch a queer love story that's very universal, right? Like, it's not like Andrea and Megan are, besides Andrea being non-binary and them being a queer couple, it's not like they're remarkably different than any straight couple anywhere in the world going through cancer and caretaking. So the beauty of being able to take something universal like mortality, end of life, caretaking, cancer, and do it in a queer love story, we have watched. It's been one of the greatest gifts, I would say, of this year, because we've been showing the film for a year now, getting to watch people fall in love with them as a couple and maybe not even understand what non-binary is, and then people who may be on the wrong side of those issues come out feeling differently. But I don't think it's because I wouldn't say it's an overtly political film. It's unfortunately political because people politicize our identities, but we're not being political in the film. You know, and we have that section in the film where Andrea's talking about gender, which is one of my favorite scenes in the film, where they're talking about their soul and eternity. And to me, it's like a real power of the film, of how we're all one. We're all going to end up in that same place, regardless of how we live on this earth. We're all heading to that same finish line. And I think that also makes it, hopefully, very universal to folks, their experience.
I also think that so much of our hate or not understanding or phobia of others really just comes from not having met those people, not having invited them into our homes and sat down and had dinner together. And so I think if we get somebody to sit in the theater and watch or press play at home, they will have gotten to meet this couple and meet Andrea, and I think it's impossible not to fall in love with Andrea.
Tell about your brother.
Ay, qué bonito.
Ryan is asking me to tell a story about my brother, who is, let's just say he has a MAGA hat on the top of his Christmas tree. Yeah, boo, you can boo. That'd be so awesome if we just booed my brother and put it on the internet. So him and I argue all the time, very like political, and just I can't. It's so difficult to interact with him. But he did come and see the film, and he's like a kind of muscle dude, at least the top up, not the legs. He skips the leg day. But he put that online too. But he saw the film and he was heaving, crying, like really just sobbing in a way I'd never seen him. And all upper body. And he came up to me, and after he gave me a hug, and he said, I feel like such an asshole. I feel like such a jerk, an idiot. I have been putting my attention on the wrong things. I've been talking to you about what doesn't matter. We have so much more in common than we do different, and I love you, and I want to be a better brother to you. And he's really been a kinder brother to me, a kinder son to both of my parents. And it was, I mean, if the film changed one person and it was him, that would be enough for me. But I think it's doing a little bit more than that.
Es que yo en la película veía muchísimas exnovias de Andrea y decía, ¿y dónde está la gente alrededor de Meg? Claro, vemos a ese hermano entonces aceptando que es un idiota, ¿no? En ese sentido. Pero tú te quería preguntar, ¿has terminado el libro?
That was a curveball. Thought I was going to talk about my people.
Bueno, ya. Bueno, podemos hablar de las dos cosas. Tu gente y tu libro son gente, es lo mismo.
Yeah, my people are some of Andrea's exes and people, but really my people have really become Ryan and Jessica, and we like travel all around the world together. I mean, we're here for one night. We go to Paris tomorrow. We go to London 2 days later. Then we're back in Los Angeles. Like we've been everywhere, and I feel like I have really just fallen. I do not feel bereft without Andrea. I feel like all of these people have come together to hold me. And even with such a significant loss so young in my life, I feel just tremendous gain. All the time, I feel very, very, very held. My book, you've heard about the travel schedule. I've not quite had the time to do it, but hopefully post the Oscars in March I will be able to. But I have continued. Andrea wrote a newsletter that was pretty big in the States, and I have continued writing that newsletter and writing a lot about grief and loss and what it's like to be a young widow, but still filtering it all through this perspective of trying to find joy and presence and, you know, accept the flow of the river of life.
Habéis viajado por todo el mundo. ¿Hay alguna anécdota de esta presentación de alguna película con la que os quedéis? Y de lo que os queda, claro.
So many, but nothing will ever top the Sundance Film Festival because Andrea was very sick, and we weren't sure if they were going to be able to make it. You never really flew on airplanes, and so they drove like halfway across the country, the two of them, to be safe and get Andrea to Park City, Utah, where Sundance is held. And getting to be in that room, Andrea and Megan and I sat in like the back row in masks, and the energy of the audience, like I said, we didn't know how this film was going to play. We didn't even know if the film was good. And the film played so big in that room. The laughter was huge, and the emotion was huge. But the audience didn't know what the ending was going to be, and they didn't know if Andrea was still alive. I think everyone assumed it would be an end-of-life film. They're very popular genre of documentaries. And so the film ended, and then the credits are playing, and I think people were waiting for a card on screen that said Andrea's death date, and then the credits ended, and then Andrea walked up on stage, and like you could feel the room was vibrating. People were jumping up and down to have Andrea there in the flesh, and it was one of the only times Andrea was able to see it in a room with other people. They got quite sick after that. So that one was incredibly special. And then there's one, you know, like film festivals are our theatrical experience now. And one that just comes to mind for me, the last film festival, because I would travel to the film festivals. They couldn't travel anymore, but they would like pop up on Zoom on a big screen afterwards, and the audience would go crazy because Andrea was there. And the last one that Andrea could do was I guess just a couple weeks before they died. It would have been June of last year. Tiny little theater called the Provincetown Film Festival, like, I don't know, 80 lesbians in a room. It wasn't even a huge screening, but to get, Andrea was so, Andrea was so sick at that point, and to me, I'll never, ever forget that one because it was the last one we were able to do, the three of us. So, I don't know, for you, if you have any anecdotes.
Best stories from the road. Well, my brother one was good for sure, but there was another man in New York. He was probably in his 50s or 60s, and he told me that he had sort of semi-recently decided that like romantic love, it just wasn't in the cards for him. He was going to focus on his career. He was going to focus on his art, his work, his family, his friends. And then he, after seeing the film, he decided he wanted to open his heart back up to romantic love. And I think that was, that was one of the best moments for me, for sure.
Es que a vuestro lado todas nuestras relaciones se quedan en nada. Es como, yo quiero tener esa relación de amor incondicional. Quiero bailar, quiero saltar, quiero jugar baloncesto. Ya lo quiero hacer todo a partir de ese día. Te quiero preguntar, ¿tú puedes ver la película a día de hoy?
Yeah, I've probably watched it maybe 15 times since Andrea has died, and I feel really lucky to have this film because, I mean, how many people get to have that? You know, how many people get to lose the love of their life or anyone so close and then get to see all your memories and get to watch them over and over and get to see your person the face that you love most in the entire world, that tall, every night if you want to, and then I feel like I'm having the inverse experience of grief, where often when we lose somebody, less and less people speak their name, and I'm having the total opposite, where more and more people know Andrea and and we talk about Andrea, and it's just like they're reborn in so many minds and hearts and and lives. It feels like a unbelievable privilege and miracle.
¿Y tuvisteis muchas horas de metraje? ¿Te costó mucho seleccionar a nivel de montaje, Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, it's always one of the most difficult parts about our job, I think, is you fall in love with the footage itself, and then you have to be pretty brutal in the final edit of the film. To me, what I thought was going to be the biggest challenge of this film was the poetry itself. Like, I thought, how are we going to weave in poetry to a documentary in a way that's dynamic and cinematic and exciting? And the more we played with the poetry in the edit, the more we realized those were our best scenes. Like, whenever we would add a poem of Andrea's, like the dinner table scene with the fingering and thumbing, which is so funny, and then it turns so sad with that aging app where they're watching themselves age. And then we plugged in that poem called Tincture, which is about the soul missing the body after death. And it just took the scene to a whole new level. And so that was probably the biggest struggle in the edit room in the end, is like, we wanted to include so many poems and we just didn't have time for it. And it was like, you know, we had hundreds of Andrea's poems, and then we had hundreds of scenes that we had shot. So when you think about that, the amount of permutations that we could do of a certain scene paired with a certain poem was like almost infinite. Like, you could continue editing for the rest of your lives, trying different poems with different scenes. So I always equate editing a documentary to musical chairs, the childhood game where when the music stops, you have to find your chair. And I think that's what great producers do with their directors. Like, sometimes we directors drive ourselves crazy creatively, thinking we can make it better, and your producers say to you at some point, like, it's there, the music has stopped, find your chair. And that's what Jess is for me. At some point she was like, we have reached the finish line. This film is beautiful and it's not getting better. We've reached the point of diminishing returns. But yeah, I mean, it was an embarrassment of riches. Like, everything that we filmed with them could have made it into the final cut. It was actually very annoying at times, because you would just want to film what we call B-roll, which is just like footage that you're just trying to plug in, like Meg working at a laptop, and then Andrew would walk in and they would start talking, and it would turn into a brilliant scene that was just supposed to be a plug-in shot. So it really was, like, so much beautiful stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor. We're starting to share with Megan all these deleted scenes, which allow her to, you know, re-remember all of these things that we shot during the year that you had likely forgotten.
Yeah, that part is really, that's been such a gift too. You know, I've seen the film so many times, so I know those memories, but the fact that there are more that wait for me, and they've like trickled them out to me slowly. It just, I mean, it's Christmas every time. Yeah.
Bueno, yo me voy a quedar, voy a pasar a las preguntas del público. Yo me voy a quedar con que uno de los mejores documentalistas del mundo ha dicho que hacer un documental es como el juego de las sillas, y me parece, para enseñarlo en las escuelas. Aquí hay muchos directores de documental que siempre me quedo con sus anécdotas, y esta es maravillosa. Bueno, ya, grandes personas aquí documentalistas. Bueno, vamos a pasar a preguntas del público. No sé si alguien tiene alguna pregunta. Álvaro, venga. Álvaro es un grandísimo director también de documentales y de películas de este país.
Well, congratulations on your movie. It was really emotional. I really enjoyed it, and it's really a privilege to be able to enter into your lives like that, no? And thank you for letting us in. I wondered whether the process of making the documentary itself was part of helping you deal with the process you were going through, and helping you find a purpose or a goal that maybe made the pressure and the suffering less?
Yeah, thank you. So I think the reason that anyone thought to make a documentary about Andrea and I in the first place, why Tig had the idea and our friend Steph, the thumbing person, was because Andrea and I had been living in such a way, especially guided by Andrea really, that was the thing that they wanted to showcase. They were like, Andrea's really facing this mortality in a remarkable way. I think that's the seed of this documentary. And we really felt so much more in love than we ever had after their diagnosis. We were dancing all of the time. We were happy, and our friends didn't understand it or didn't believe it. They would think like, is this just something you're saying on social media? Are you being toxically positive? Like, tell us the truth, what's going on? And we'd be like, the number one adjective we use to describe ourselves is lucky. That's what we felt like. Oh my God, lucky we got this wake-up call so we could remember our love and remember what's important. And we tried as writers to capture that, and I think that we failed often because our closest people were like, I'm not so sure. But when we were approached to do the documentary, Andrea was on a treatment that messed with their eyesight quite a bit, and it was very difficult to write because it was hard to look at the screen. And I think there was a massive appeal to Andrea that they could make art passively, that we could just hang out in our bedroom, we could go to the hospital, we could play the puppy game with our dogs where they run back and forth for a treat, and somebody would turn it into art. This was a big appeal. But also, I think we knew at that point that because they had just gotten very hard news before we began filming, and that the camera there would act as a witness to remind us to keep doing as we had been doing, to keep trying to make art of this time and beauty of this time and love of this time together. But I think the real reason that the documentary helped both of us was not necessarily the witness angle of the camera, but it was because we had done everything just us. We were so protected because of COVID and Andrea's weakened immune system, and it was just, everything was just Andrea and I, which we liked. I mean, we really got along and really loved each other. But when we invited in the documentary crew, we suddenly had 4 or 5 friends who were there every single time, and we were having so much joy. We were making art with our friends. That was like the big thing going on in our life. And I think just the community element and opening our hearts again to more love and to more people was really the highlight of that year.
¿Alguien más tiene alguna pregunta? Álvaro?
This is a very technical, and maybe I'm wrong, but there is one shot that you repeat like 5 times, which is the swing of the I don't know what it is, trousers. I think it's the only shot that is repeated, and it's repeated like 5 times. Why did you do that?
There is one shot repeated twice, and then there's a few others. It's because, well, Andrea was using, it's a line in one of their poetry, but the word is thimbles, like that little metal thing that's used to sew. That was Andrea's grandmother's thimble. Andrea's grandmother was a seamstress, right? And so there was like a symbolism there that Andrea was always talking about. And you probably noticed in the film, like there's very few interviews. Like there's a lot of conversation. It's kind of the beauty of filming a love story between 2 poets, is like I didn't have to do a lot of interviewing, which I'd prefer not to do if I can. But when we needed to have conversations, it would often be asking Andrea, like, well, what were you going to do anyway today? And one of those things was sewing. They really wanted to sew with their grandmother's thimbles, and they wanted to sew something together. What was the line in the poetry? It was to repair something.
Friend's clothes. It was Steph's shirt, I think.
It was Steph's, our producer's shirt. So it became one of like our anchor scenes that Andrea enjoyed doing that didn't feel like interview. So that's actually multiple different times that Andrea would say like, can we sew, and I'll have a conversation with you.
Otro documentalista fantástico, Robert. Esta sección documental.
Hi there. As you know, it's my second time seeing the film, and it's amazing to see it again. And I just wanted to ask, I think it's so powerful to hear the story about what you were able to shoot on the first day or so of shooting, and how you both decided to open yourselves up and give yourselves to the film. And I'm really curious, we feel that intimacy, but at the same time, over the course of the year, I can only imagine that there was a deepening of that connection and that relationship. And so I'd be very curious how that grew and evolved, and if there are scenes that perhaps are scenes from much later in that relationship that where other things come to life in the film.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Robert. It's a great opportunity to also give credit to our DP. His name's Brandon Sommerhalder, because, like Megan said, it was 4 people. So it was myself, Jess, our DP Brandon, and our sound person Dave. Same sound person on every shoot, which, as you know, that's sometimes rare in documentary that you're bringing the same sound person on location. So Brandon and Dave also, I mean, I don't mean to speak for you, but they became beloved by Andrea and Megan as well. And so often what would happen is we would often arrive, sometimes before they even woke up, but often it was Megan had woken up, Andrea had not. And we would just enter the house, even if Megan wasn't there, like just go into the kitchen. And sometimes Megan would say to us, I mean, it would take many iterations, but like a version of, Andrea is upstairs crying, but they said you guys should come up. Or I remember one time nearing the end, it was Andrea's vomiting, which was a big deal because Andrea didn't vomit a lot, but like they said, you can go up there. And often what we would do in those situations is Brandon was so close with Andrea that we didn't want it to feel like all 4 of us, you know, going up the stairs and coming into a really sensitive situation. The 3 of us would stay downstairs, and Brandon would just go up alone because he was so close with Andrea. And so hinged on that as well are almost all of the hospital scenes, because the hospital was very sensitive, understandably, to there not being a documentary crew in a chemotherapy floor. They didn't want us to bring cameras up there, so they would allow 2 people to be with Andrea, 2 friends or family members, and so Brandon would be the second person. And so Dave, our sound person, because he couldn't go in, he would literally put lavaliers on Brandon's arms. So Brandon would use his arms as the boom mic in the hospital, and Brandon would film on his iPhone. And so it allowed us, because I think you both were so comfortable with both of them, it allowed us to hopefully access these really sensitive situations in a way that didn't feel, not that I think you would have felt we were invasive, because the 6 of us all were so close, but it wouldn't feel like a big group witnessing something. We could just send one person in. And now when I watch the finished film, a lot of the shots that make it in there are those moments where Brandon went in somewhere alone. And we realized at some point that Brandon and Andrea were very similar people. They were like kind of kindred spirits in a way, like sort of sibling-like. And so I think there was a comfortability there. They would play basketball together all the time. There was a comfortability there that with, I think our crews often don't get the credit. Or they get the credit for the aesthetics and the images, but they don't get the credit for the relationship building. And that was key in this case. To the point, I always like to say, like, we all visited Andrea right before Andrea passed away. But Dave, our sound person, was actually the last person. Like, he went days before Andrea died and just laid in bed with Andrea. And then he returned, like a week after Andrea died and just helped Megan around the house. And I think that's just, I like to point that out because I just think it's an example of the closeness in this documentary of not just myself as the director, but everybody, because I'm so grateful for them building those relationships with them because I see it throughout the film, to your point.
I guess I'll just say one thing that I remember is that you were trying to get sort of B-roll of just me perhaps writing, typing, and we're like, oh, well, we were planning to edit my memoir today. We'll just do that, and you'll get some shots of me typing. And this was like very late on.
This was like
maybe
3 weeks before Sundance when we were
Yeah.
just trying to put in a shot of Megan at a laptop.
Yeah, and it ended up being the octopoidal scene, which is probably the second funniest. So, yeah, and just I think you can like see the camera shaking a little bit because Brandon is laughing so much. And what's true is we just like, yes, there was like more. I don't even just want to say like the intimacy comes from like harder experiences. Sometimes the intimacy came just from like laughing with each other more.
Otra documentalista fantástica.
You're full of them.
Están
Hi.
todos juntos.
So we didn't do this on purpose. It was just a coincidence. Well, first off, thank you for coming to Spain. It's actually important for us that big documentaries and you guys chose to come. Documentary filmmakers in Spain, we're always trying to shed a light and to explain to people that it could be film, so that thank you for coming. And I also wanted to thank you both for the film. Thank you, Megan, for opening and for letting Ryan and the team come into your lives. I think the world is a better place because you chose to do that. And thank you, Ryan, for following this with so much heart. I do have a question, actually. It is a painful film for all of those of us who are grieving, right? I was very struck by the love and the sense of humor with which you both faced mortality and the upcoming death of, Andreas. And I wanted to ask you, right, how did you handle, both of you, that pain, right? Even if you, Megan, said that you were optimistic, obviously it was coming closer and closer, right? So how did you deal with that pain as a crew? Since you were friends, you were feeling it as well. And then also in the edit. And the second question is, did you and Andrea get to see the film before to give them feedback? Or how was that process? Because sometimes, especially if you're friends and you're very involved and you're also a producer right now, that is part of a process. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll talk about the watching it for the first time. So they showed us the film in our living room with Ryan. The whole crew was there watching us watch it, and it will say that it's a very unnatural thing for a human to watch themselves in a documentary. It's not like watching yourself as an actor where you know what lines you're going to say. It is like, I have no idea what the heck is going to happen in this scene. I don't hardly remember being there, and how am I being portrayed as a person? It was totally weird. We had both Andrea and I were like, was that good? We just had no concept of if it was any good the first time we watched it. But what I felt was that Andrea was sort of publicly known as this very wise, very brilliant, very heart-centered, just sage, beautiful, deep person. But what the world didn't know about, but the person I fell in love with, is the idiot at the mailbox. the total, absolute goofball, charming, hilarious dork, wrestling with that thing and coming up and inventive, and just that's who I loved. And so when I watched it, I felt so grateful that the world would get to see Andrea is a very dynamic person, and the whole prismatic experience that was Andrea Gibson. And so I turned to Andrea and I was like, I don't know what the heck we just watched, but what I will say is that they captured you, they got you. And Andrea's response was, that's so funny, because I'm like, who was that on screen? I don't know what to think or feel. But their first thought was, oh, somebody finally understands Meg. People are going to understand who Meg is. So I think for us to both see the person we loved most represented was like, oh, I think something's clicking. And then, by the second or third time, I think by the third time Andrea watched it, they turned to Ryan and they said, you made a good film there, or something like that. I've already forgot the other question.
I remember.
Okay.
But I also just want to say to that, because when you're all documentary filmmakers, every collaboration's different. Sometimes your subjects feel very strongly when they've seen the film. Sometimes it's always surprising what they care about. Andrea and Megan are different people, but Andrea especially, and I don't know if it's because Andrea thought this was going to be an end-of-life film and they would never see it, or maybe it's just part of Andrea's DNA. Andrea was so trusting when it came to just handing it over, even their poetry. I remember saying to Andrea at some point, because Andrea's poems can be really long, and I remember saying to Andrea at some point, are you cool with me cutting down your poems to fit more of them in? And Andrea was like, I don't care. Do what you think makes a great film. And so there was a real beauty, a beauty in that trust that Andrea just really did not ever really seem to care about what the final product was going to be. Megan showed a little more curiosity, you would come around a corner and she'd be like, how are you going to use that scene, So she liked pulling the curtain back a little bit more, but it was fun to work with them in different ways in that way. But I think they felt that, which you guys have done as documentary filmmakers. I always think it's the worst experience showing a subject for the first time. No matter how much they're going to love the film in a few weeks, the first time is just so uncomfortable for everyone. So that after that landslide, there were still no notes. It was just okay, I guess we're going to Sundance and we'll see how it plays.
That's not true. I told you to add more dogs.
Which I
Yeah.
did. More shots
More
of dogs.
I also said you could use better dancing footage of me, which it was a note you did not take.
That note we didn't get until after Sundance. That's not fair.
But I do know that the note that Andrea had that was really important to them was that they didn't, and this was the only note they gave before, was that they didn't want there to be any villains in the film, not even cancer.
Yeah, and that was something Andrea would say to repeatedly, whatever you do, can you not try to villainize anyone or anything?
No doctor
in my
that
life.
Messed up, no person, no...
Right.
Yeah, nothing. So.
Which I'm grateful for, because we can want to lean into some of that drama at times, and Andrea was very cognizant of that. To your other point on just, the other question was more about grief and the heaviness and how we've traversed it. I feel like we fell in love with Andrea. Losing Andrea was very, very difficult. That phone call that Megan made to me that day that Andrea died, I was with my mom. It was my mom's 75th birthday. We were in Maine, which is where Andrea's from. I was on the water of Maine, where Andrea grew up, just by coincidence. I couldn't be there because it was my mom's 75th birthday. And Megan calling me on my mom's 75th birthday and saying, Andrea died and I want you to go out and do something beautiful today with your mom, was the biggest gift given to me. I had so much fun that day and so grateful that I'm oh my gosh, I'm with my mom who made it to 75 years old. How lucky am I? And it was a devastating day that we had lost Andrea, and that sort of gift has continued. Like the privilege of getting to be with Megan, we're calling it grieving publicly, that we've gotten to witness for the last 7 months, has been like the most beautiful experience of my entire life. And we feel Andrea with us. It's not like we feel Andrea is gone, but getting to watch Megan interact with people afterwards. Like, we were really nervous about Megan at the beginning. You know this as documentary filmmakers. You want to protect your subjects from having to shoulder too much emotion or too many people's stories afterwards. And Megan was like, bring it on. Like, I'm loving the interactions with people afterwards. I love hearing people's stories of their own caretaking or their own grief or their own cancer journey that they're going through. And so, you know, the loss of Andrea is devastating, but getting to be alongside their partner and watch Megan traverse this, that's where it's been life-changing for me, truly.
Love you.
Bueno, es que la película yo creo que nos ha cambiado la vida a todos. O sea, lo que pasa aquí es como que sales renovado, porque por lo menos, bueno, ahora viene tu sorpresa.
Oh, yeah.
O sea, antes de que nos pongamos peor.
Yes. So Andrea wrote, and I want to say thank you to our translator. Holy cow, you were incredible. And to be able to come to a country where I don't know the language, where I know it very, very minimally, and get to speak to people I wouldn't have had the opportunity to speak with otherwise really, really means a lot to me. So thank you. Yeah. Round of applause for the translator.
Bueno. Meg, sigue, si quieres, como para empezar, ¿sigue el mismo buzón que dejó Andrea? ¿O has cambiado el buzón?
Yeah, you know, they actually only used about half the mailbox scenes that we have, half the mailbox mishap. So, yeah, right now, I think you do see this mailbox in the film. It's the one where, like, the door falls off, and it's not really a mailbox. It's more of a filing cabinet. It is currently, Andrea belted it with one of their own belts to a pole in the earth, and it has survived the snowplow thus far. And lots of people write to me. This is mostly lesbians offering to build me a mailbox, which is like the most Colorado lesbian thing anyone can imagine. And I really appreciate the offer, but I realize that I don't want an indestructible mailbox, because I know the next time it gets down or is blown away or some, I don't know, bear takes it on a picnic or whatever is happening with those things, it will feel like an ongoing inside joke running back and forth between Andrea and I. So please don't send me a mailbox. Thank you. But I appreciate the thought. It's the thought that counts. So I am going to read a poem that Andrea wrote for me. I'll read it slow for the translation. And this poem, Andrea wrote it for me, and it's called Love Letter from the Afterlife. And it has been just like the most comforting words that I can imagine. And I know Andrea knew it would be comforting for me to have now, but I think they also knew that it would be tremendously comforting to anyone who's ever lost anybody. And so I think it really serves as a great epilogue to our film. I have Andrea speaking to the audience, but I also invite you to imagine, if it would be good for you, to imagine these words are being spoken to you from somebody that you've lost that you would like to hear from, because the poet laureate of heaven strikes again. Love letter from the afterlife. My love, I was so wrong. Dying is the opposite of leaving. When I left my body, I did not go away. That portal of light was not a portal to elsewhere, but a portal to here. I am more here than I ever was before. I am more with you than I ever could have imagined. So close you look past me when wondering where I am. It's okay. I know that to be human is to be far-sighted. But feel me now, walking the chambers of your heart, pressing my palms to the soft walls of your living. Why did no one tell us that to die is to be reincarnated in those we love while they are still alive? Ask me the altitude of heaven, and I will answer, how tall are you? In my back pocket is a love note with every word you wish you'd said. At night, I sit ecstatic at the loom, weaving forgiveness into our worldly regrets. All day, I listen to the radio of your memories. Yes, I know every secret you thought too dark to tell me, and love you more, for everything you feared might make me love you less. When you cry, I guide your tears toward the garden of kisses I once planted on your cheek, so you know they are all perennials. Forgive me for not being able to weep with you. One day you will understand. One day you will know why I read the poetry of your grief to those waiting to be born, and they are all the more excited. There is nothing I want for now that we are so close. I open the curtain of your eyelids with my own smile every morning. I wish you could see the beauty your spirit is right now making of your pain. Your deep-seated fears playing musical chairs, laughing about how real they are not. My love, I want to sing it through the rafters of your bones. Dying is the opposite of leaving. I want to echo it through the corridor of your temples. I am more with you than I ever was before. Do you understand? It was me who beckoned the stranger who caught you in her arms when you forgot not to order for two at the coffee shop. It was me who was up all night gathering sunflowers into your chest, the last day you feared you would never again wake up feeling light-hearted. I know it's hard to believe, but I promise it's the truth. I promise one day you will say it too. I can't believe I ever thought I could lose you. Thank you.
Es el coloquio más difícil de mi vida. Gracias por esto.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ay.